There are many tall walls and obstacles that lay in our way as we journey to become the best people we can be. And one constant that comes with that in our life is winning and losing. It's a feeling we're all too familiar with. Putting our hearts into something, working so hard on it, and reaching that success we so hopelessly fought for. Or we don't reach what we want, and we watch everything crumble around us as we lose. After all, in most circumstances in life, there can only be one winner and one loser. Hinata Shoyo is someone who knows this feeling all too well. He spent 3 years of his junior high career training and practicing for the day he would finally step into the court for a volleyball tournament. He wanted to be just like the little giant that he admired from Karasuno, the person that inspired him to get into volleyball in the first place. And as his 3rd year came near a close, he finally got his chance to be in a tournament. Ready to finally prove himself to the world, he pushed himself to the limit in that match, only to lose. After all of those years, he only got to spend a single match on the court. Despite spending the last 3 years of his life just to lose, this didn't keep Hinata down. Volleyball is one of those circumstances in life I mentioned earlier, where there can only be one winner and one loser. And Haikyuu utilizes that to the advantage of its story like no other piece of media I've seen. The feelings of both teams are felt and respected, and that desire to win is almost tangible to anyone watching. The entire first season focuses on this aspect of sports and opts to make an incredibly bold decision in Karasuno's first tournament. They lose. The weight of this loss is one I'd like to discuss in today's video, because I think understanding it and its outcome can give someone a fuck ton of inspiration and drive to continue following their heart and dreams. So, let's begin. The stones are set for this painful outcome very early on in the series, when the team is first established. Kagayama's junior high team of course pummeled Hinata's team, leaving a long-lasting impression on our orange-haired little dude. This defeat leads Hinata to vow that the next time they're on the court together, he will beat Kagayama. Well, they are on the court together again pretty shortly after, but on a team, not against each other. Needless to say that they did not get along very well. At all. As they are always butting heads and trying to outdo one another. So right off the bat, a piece of tension is placed on the team. Can Hinata and Kagayama get along well enough during a serious game? Not to mention, Kagayama has a reputation that's followed him from junior high, where he's known as the king of the court, where he only will acknowledge those he needs to win in a match. This reputation also states him getting super angry when things don't go his way on the court. This isn't all though, as Tsukishima also doesn't get along well with Kagayama because of his reputation, although their relationship tends to be outright aggression compared to his rivalry with Hinata. So again, we have beef that could start on the court. The team was also already in shambles because their last inter-high tournament didn't go very well. But the biggest stress that is on the team is the fact that this is possibly the 3rd year's last season. In Japan, college entrance exams tend to take place in December and January, so it's pretty normal for most students to retire from club activities during the summer, so that way they can study to get into the desired colleges. Daichi, Sugawara, and later Asahi all have this burning desire to make it to nationals. But up until now, they have always lost the tournaments they've attended. The upcoming Inter-High tournament could very well be their last chance, because if they were to lose this, they'd have to sacrifice precious time to study for their college entrance exams. Speaking of the 3rd years, I'd actually like to talk a little bit more about Asahi. He had quit club activities after their last Inter-High, which, again, was a disaster, and created a lot of insecurities in him. All in all, Kagayama has a reputation that haunts him and makes him worry his teammates will give up on him. There is beef between teammates and an overall lack of synergy since a lot of them aren't used to playing the positions they are, and the possibility of letting the 3rd years down and closing out their volleyball dreams with a loss? Yeah, the pressure is certainly there. Contrary to how fumbled the team may seem though, they're able to beat the powerhouse team of Aoba Johsai. They weren't prepared for Kagayama's setting skills, Hinata's power despite his height, Daichi's power to pull his team together, and Tsukishima's height. Although the match does take a brief unexpected turn towards the end. The game was going very swimmingly for Karasuno, but the moment their setter and Kagayama's upperclassman Oikawa showed up, the game began to change very quickly. If Oikawa had joined the game any sooner, it's very clear the game would have gone much differently. It doesn't help that Johsai also knows Karasuno's weaknesses now. One very interesting thing that happens after their practice match with Seijoh is Ukai, their future coach, currently is just a clerk at this point in the series. He has no attachment to the team at all, despite the fact that they might play volleyball, so his demeanor is typically pretty cold towards them. They leave one day without buying anything, just kind of to pop by, but he gets onto them by giving them food and telling them that they need to eat a proper meal to grow and get stronger. This might seem like a random thing to mention here, but trust me, we'll get back to this later. Anyways, things continue to look up for them after this practice match. Karasuno is able to pull Asahi, who I mentioned earlier, the team's old ace spiker, out of retirement thanks to their rowdy first years. They're able to get a phenomenal libero in the form of Nishinoya because he's no longer suspended anymore. And the teacher who sponsors the volleyball club manages to recruit Ukai to be their coach. Because, surprise, surprise, not only is he a store clerk, but he's the son of the former Karasuno coach, who was very prestigious. Don't let these upsides fool you though, because the team absolutely still has some issues. Kagayama and Hinata have managed to turn their bitterness into a competitive rivalry for the time being, but Tsukishima and Kagayama still don't get along at all. The pressure of the third year still lay over their head, and a new problem arises after the practice match with Sugawara. He approaches Coach Ukai and lets him know that while Kagayama is absolutely a better player, he still wants to have his place on the court, either as a substitute or a backup. So while having Kagayama on the court is by far the best decision Ukai could make as far as coaching goes because of his talent, he needs to find the time and place to be able to respect Sugawara's wishes both as a player and as a third year. With those details in mind, our team went off to fight Nekoma for the first time. Ended up playing several matches against him. While they were fun and good learning experiences, Karasuno didn't walk out winning a single match. Kagayama and Hinata both talk about afterwards how if that were a real tournament, they'd be out of the running after the first game. This is immense foreshadowing because of Chekhov's law, since it's placed intentionally after the credits. Chekhov's law is a writing rule some of you may be familiar with already. It states that every element in a story should be relevant, and while Haikyuu is usually loose and lighthearted, with dabbled humor in, this moment is definitely not one of those lighter moments. Production IG doesn't use many after-credit scenes in Season 1 of the series, so this scene being here speaks volumes for its importance to the plot since they decided to break one of their rules with structure. Now is when we get to the main meat of the video, the Inter-High Tournament, what the entire season has been leading to. All of their bickering, training, and practice matches have led to this moment. Haruchi Furudate, the mangaka for Haikyuu, expertly utilizes another writing rule for this arc called the Rule of Three, not to be confused with the Rule of Thirds, which is a photography and videography thing. The Rule of Three is a theory that things are more effective, humorous, or satisfying in batches of 3. This rule is heightened by the tone immediately set through Karasuno's first match against Tokonami High, an episode fittingly called Winners and Losers. In this episode, the story isn't being told from the view of Karasuno's boys. It's being told from the perspective of Tokonami High, and also the Karasuno girls team. Tokonami High has an unexpected reunion for Daichi, as he is playing against one of his old friends from junior high, named Ikejiri. Before high school, their last tournament at junior high had them winning their first match miraculously. They were all ecstatic, but started to lose faith because their next match was against a powerhouse of a school. However, Daichi managed to uplift their spirits, although they still ended up losing that match. The rest of his team, including Ikejiri, weren't upset at all by this loss, but Daichi was fuming with frustration that they didn't win. Their two reactions to this match would put them both on separate paths for how they would handle volleyball in high school, one that Ikejiri only realizes going against Karasuno at the Enter High. Tokonami High does not win their match against Karasuno. Hinata is ecstatic at their win because this is the first official tournament match he's ever won. Remember, the only other time he's played, he got smashed by Kagayama's team. He can't believe he gets to play on the court again. But his happiness comes at the cost of the other teams. While this went down, Karasuno's girls lose their match too, and they're all distraught over it. This is a bittersweet episode because the boys, they're our protagonists. Obviously we're happy for them, but we know what the other team is feeling and we know what the girls are feeling. We get two very different perspectives on losing from the Karasuno girls and Tokonami High, where the girls, Mishimiya, who is a third year, stays composed and does what she can to cheer everyone up. She tried her hardest in the match to lead them forward, And even after her time on the court is done, she doesn't want to stop being their shoulder. She is the captain after all. However, the moment she's out of sight from her team, she begins to cry wildly and blame herself for not training harder and for not covering everyone's weaknesses better. With Tokonami High, Ikijire realizes that while initially he was very passionate about volleyball, throughout high school that passion just began to fade, and he took it less and less seriously. Now that he's lost for the final time in his last year, he feels nothing but regret for not trying when he had all the time in the world to do so. Both of these responses are incredibly realistic takes on losing, as the captain naturally will shoulder the blame the most for a loss. Mishimiya did her best, but even in her final year, with all of her training, she lost the first match. Ikijire is at the bargaining stage of grief, where he finally realizes after all this time where he was going wrong and how stupid he feels for it. And he does what many do in this spot after losing. He asks Daichi to continue winning for him in Tokonami High. When you lose, you know it's over. But more times than not, I see the losers ask the winner to keep going for them. I'm not sure if it's an ego thing that you want who beats you to keep winning, or if you genuinely want your hopes to keep going to that finish line somehow. After all, there can only be one winner in volleyball, and in this episode, you really feel that weight. Hinata was able to bounce back quickly because he knew he would get another chance to prove himself. But for Mishimiya and Ikijire, that door closed the moment the referee blew his whistle for the last time. Hinata stares at Ikijire as he walks away, more than likely seeing himself in him because his only other tournament experience went exactly how this looks. He knows what it's like to be in that spot. I appreciate this episode a lot because, again, Haikyuu is able to perfectly respect the feelings of both winning and losing. This establishes the first notch in the rule of 3, being an episode focused on losing, and it also dropped a very meta comment. Ikijire says if this were a work of fiction, the protagonist would make it to nationals and we'd all just be extras. This is a play on Tokonami actually being extras in this scenario, but also foreshadows the breaking of this trope later on. Next up is the match against Dateko, where Asahi has to face his insecurities and the team that made him go into retirement. I will keep this match brief, as it doesn't add to the philosophy of losing and winning very much. Karasuno is able to pick up the win once again, and in the process become closer as a team, and help Asahi move past some of his major insecurities. This also adds more to the rule of 3, as Karasuno has now won 2 matches. If they win their third, this would capitalize the rule and feel super satisfying. But if they were to lose, it would be even more devastating than if they had lost their first match. With the hopes that Karasuno now carries on their shoulders, and knowing about this rule, we watch as they move into their next faithful rematch against Aoba Johsai. Unlike the last few matches in the series, this match against Johsai is 4 episodes long. Naturally, many important character moments and plot points unfold during this match. One constant on the court is this underlying ego battle between Kagayama and Oikawa, the 2 setters for both teams. They both went to the same junior high, and Kagayama looked up to Oikawa because he was his upperclassman and the team's setter. The relationship was not a healthy one though, because Kagayama's natural talent immediately threatened Oikawa's role on the team. He was already in a bad place because even though he thought himself as a good player, no matter how hard he trained or pushed himself, their team could never beat the junior high team for Shira Torizawa. He became very envious of this natural talent from their wing spiker Ushiwaka, and that envy led to hatred against Kagayama. Provides a very interesting commentary on the debate between natural talent and learned talent, one that can be seen in any competitive form. Natural talent is the ability to naturally perform extremely well in a given field, as if you were born with a head start in that field or your brain was just wired to be good at it. Learned talent, or hard work, is where you may not be the best at something at first, but you put a lot of time to make yourself really good at something. Both are needed for success in any given field, but there is still usually a battle between those with and without natural talent, as seen in Haikyu. Oikawa feels a burning drive to win this match because he is bitter against Kagayama's natural talent, and he's made a goal to beat Shiratorizawa. He has to beat Karasuno if he wants to get to that match. That's not all that's going on with Kagayama in this match though, as of course Sugawara still also feels that burning desire to be on the court. Again, natural talent versus learned talent. Johsai also has two of Kagayama's former teammates from his junior high on their team. These teammates, Yutaro Kendaichi and Akira Kunimi, both are also extremely bitter towards Kagayama because of his persona he built during his last year of junior high, the king of the court that I mentioned earlier. These two are there to constantly remind him of his past, as they clearly aren't happy with him even to this day, and Oikawa is able to pull a lot out of the two, something Kagayama never could do. This puts a lot of mental strain on Kagayama because it makes him worry that he isn't able to do what's best for his current team. It doesn't help that after a huge point deficit begins to come into play, Kagayama's king of the court mentality seems to seep its way back in. And just like in junior high, it leads to him getting called off the court and Sugawara being put in. This, as I mentioned earlier, is another thing Kagayama has to face in this match, his upperclassman's desire to be on the court. Sugawara immediately makes anyone able to tell that he creates a comfortable environment for his entire team on the court. While Kagayama is reliable because of his natural talent, Sugawara is like Oikawa in the sense that he has learned talent on top of being very friendly and personable. Because of the aforementioned point deficit, he tries to get everyone to loosen up while Kagayama calms his nerves. And it works. The entire team feels a lot more at ease and confident. Even Tsukishima, who is a pompous asshole, gets quiet and flustered when interacting with Sugawara. Thanks to Sugawara, they're able to pull back a lot of points, but they end up losing the first set due to Hinata hitting the ball off the court. More on this later. Kagayama ends up getting put back on the court, but with a lot of insight that he didn't have before. He's able to see that Sugawara's friendliness and care for his team leads them all to perform better, and that tossing the ball in a spot that's good for them makes scoring much easier instead of how he thinks, where he wants to put it in a spot where they can hit it, it's easier on him. He even gives someone a high five, which is absolutely unheard of for him at this point in time. A message clearly in this season is there are 6 players on the court, meaning you aren't alone. The opening for the first episode has Hinata exclaim that he's able to overcome tall walls because he has a team with him to help him fly. Kagayama, who was known as the king of the court, I can imagine how hard it must be to see your teammates flourish without him. Take Kunimi, for example. He never took volleyball very seriously, but under Oikawa, he seems to be taking it very seriously. This makes Kagayama feel like a failure because if he was never able to pull his competitive nature out of Kunimi, is he really a good setter? He already felt that his team could turn on him at any moment because of his overbearing competitiveness. So I'm sure seeing his old teammates added on to this feeling of loneliness and almost feeling like a failure. But even so, Karasuno is bringing the best out of him and teaching him teamwork. So on top of all of these elements geared toward Kagayama, they're also clearly pushing every player in it to their limits, making them learn new techniques and moves, and also learning a lot about themselves in the process. They are all filled with determination to keep playing, to not lose. And because of this, both teams will do anything they can to keep being on the court. The results of this are Seijoh winning the first set, and Karasuno pulling a win in the second set. As they move into the final set, Hinata thinks back to Ichijiri begging Daichi to keep winning, and to One shaking his hand after beating Datetek in a moment very similar to the end credit scene between him and Kagayama. Hinata feels the need to win his match strongly, not just for himself though, for those that came before him and lost to Karasuno, for his 3rd year since this is their last chance, and for Kagayama. The score is 31-32. They're at match point. During an extremely hype moment of Hinata jumping for the perfect toss after they rallied the ball back and forth multiple times, Hinata spikes the ball into blockers. They were able to tell his attack was coming, ironically because of Kagayama's newfound ability to trust his teammates. So they used his trust against him. They knew he'd bring the ball to Hinata. After all, one of the biggest strengths on the Karasuno team was the duo between Hinata and Kagayama. They are practically reliant on it. Because of this foresight, everyone stands there, helplessly, as they watch the ball hit the court. Karasuno loses. Our protagonists lost the most important match they've played so far. This is such an incredibly bold decision narratively because I feel very rarely I see the protagonists lose. Because, I mean, they're the main characters. They have to win, right? But Haikyu challenges this idea. Why should they have to win just because they're the main characters? We all feel like the main characters of our own stories, just like Karasuno does. But that doesn't mean we deserve the win. This completes the rule of 3. As I mentioned earlier, they won the first 2 matches, but we are subverted within the third, a loss. And because of this, it feels all the more devastating. Immediately feeling the weight of what just happened, Hinata goes to apologize to Daichi, since this is now the end of his volleyball career. But he tells him not to apologize, because what he did was no mistake. They line up, shake hands, and then are immediately shoved off the court because the next team needs to warm up. There is no time to process their loss. Once outside, Kagayama and Hinata realize their time on the court is done for now. They feel weak, and this weighs heavily on Hinata. He lost his first match on the court back in junior high, so he's accustomed to losing. But after finally getting his chance on a real team to compete, he was the reason they lost both sets, and he was painfully aware of it. This guilt manifests itself in violence when Kagayama makes it sound as if tossing to him at the end was a mistake, which in a way is Kagayama already regressing on his trust with his teammates. Before their fight is pushed any further, they have their idea of losing challenged by their teacher, the sponsor for the volleyball club. He tells them they were both amazing today, and even if they lost, it was a worthwhile match. Although Kagayama and Hinata don't reply to him, suggesting that because they lost their match, it was meaningless now. The teacher decides to level with them, and asks if losing proves to themselves that they're weak. His philosophy is that after losing, the challenge isn't to accept the loss, it's to stand up. And if you can't get off your hands and knees, then you're truly weak. This directly challenges Hinata and Kagayama's views, as they see losing and not being able to be on the court, establishing them as weak. But being weak is when you can't get up. You can't accept your mistakes, and where you could improve. You can't move on. Moving on is strength. What a brilliant way to view losing, as I'm sure there are many who feel exactly like Kagayama and Hinata after a loss. You didn't make it through to the next round, or even to the winner's circle. Why at all should you feel any sort of happiness? We dwell on it, analyze it, where we may have gone wrong in our minds, try to imagine how things would have gone if we didn't make those mistakes. Our losses can eat us alive, which is why the ability to look at them productively, learn from them and grow, and then to move on is true strength. It is how we let our losses build us so that we can become victors. After they leave the sports hall, we're met with my favorite scene in the entire series, and the reason I even started making this video. They go to a restaurant to recover their muscles with a good meal. Does this sound familiar? This entire sequence is a direct parallel to the aftermath after Karasuno's practice match against Johsai at the beginning of the series. They took their win for granted then, and Ukai was a store clerk back then, and in a harsher tone, gave them free food because they needed it after a good workout. Here, they've experienced a crushing defeat to Johsai. With the weight of many teams and the third year's hopes and dreams on their shoulders completely gone, Ukai tells them wholeheartedly to eat because they tired themselves and they needed to grow stronger. The tone is different from him because you can tell he now has a deep appreciation for Karasuno's team. So, they give their thanks for the food, and they begin to finally get the chance to process their loss. And they sob. They did their best, but in the end they couldn't make it. Naturally, they're all upset about it now. I mean, who wouldn't be? But no one wants to make it a big deal or talk about it. There are 6 players on the court. They all share their sorrow together. This is a very human moment. More of a human moment than I've seen in any anime. There are also so many small moments in the scene that work well for characterization. Daichi, despite being the team captain, always looks to Sugawara for help with things because he isn't always in the right. A captain always can't be correct. He needs his cabinet. After being told to eat, Daichi looks to Sugawara, who gives him a nod to eat. And even still is uncertain about the situation, so Daichi stutters when normally he's very certain with his words. After he begins to eat, since he's the captain, everyone else follows. Hinata, the bundle of joy and normally the biggest go-getter, is the last one who says thanks for the meal, and he mumbles it so pitifully. Kagayama, not wanting to quote-unquote lose to Hinata, begins eating his food only after he does, because even after losing, he still has that little bit of competitive spirit in him. Nishinoya, another go-getter, in all energy, shovels down a plate to himself because that's just something he would do. And Suki, who currently lacks the passion for volleyball, is eating calmly and not crying. I love this scene. It works perfectly on a characterization level and even better on a thematic level. This loss is what made Karasuno what it is. They learned so much from it and were only able to truly push themselves because of the pressure that match put on them. I guarantee that if they won this match, we would not care as deeply as we do about the team because we wouldn't have seen them all go through such heavy grief. And then the intense motivation that they feel afterwards. This motivation does not come immediately though. Grieving takes time. Rarely after losing, when you've prepared for something for so long, is it easy to just snap your fingers and move past it. Hinata is seen reminiscing about the tournament in class with a grimace on his face, meaning 2 things. 1, he regrets not being able to be on the court longer because it was so much fun to play. Or 2, he wishes he could have done something differently and not caused them the loss. While some of the plays he made during the tournament he thought were funny or okay, like hitting the net when he served, now it's making him especially angry. Those silly mistakes of his, he believes, cost them the match, and he can't bear not being on the court again. He isn't alone though. We see Tanaka unable to focus in class and angry. Suki, who's normally unfazed, seems to be lost in thought. And Nishinoya looks as if he has cried a lot since their loss. Probably because he puts a lot of the burden on himself since he wasn't able to defend everyone's back like he promised. Asahi, Sugawara, and Daichi, our 3rd years, all seem deeply bothered and unable to focus. Daichi believes that the 3rd years should back out and focus on their studies for college since the club's 1st and 2nd years are so strong. The 3rd years aren't needed. Daichi's grief with losing, even if he doesn't realize it, is making him give up. Him giving up here feels very reminiscent of Asahi's response to losing to Date Tech at the last Inter-High tournament, where he decided to retire and give up volleyball. Kagayama is of course also frustrated and daydreams about it in class. He continues to think about how Oikawa performs better than him and pulls his entire team together as a unit. He wants to be able to do that too. Yamaguchi, who was put in as a bench server and hit the net on his first serve, recognizes he wasn't ready to be in the match yet and wants to be better prepared for the next time he's in. All of these are completely realistic feelings for people who have lost. They are all experiencing different stages of grief. It doesn't take long though before Tanaka and the 2nd years, of course still upset, say that it's better to try to take this anger they feel and use it for the spring tournament. This one match should not define them. During lunch, Hinata and Kagayama go to the gym where they take out their frustrations and their grief. They scream, they jump, they spike balls because they can't handle knowing that someone out there robbed them of their time to be on the court. After they've calmed down, they agree that there's no time to dwell or stop. They need to keep moving forward. They all decide to stay in the club together, now knowing their weaknesses and having evaluated what they need to do differently. and to improve themselves. Losing doesn't prove they were weak. Losing gave them a direction to follow. Even the third years decide to put off their college entrance exams and realize their dreams in volleyball, with the weight on the upcoming spring tournament being the absolute final chance the third years will have to go to nationals. The season ends with a continuation of Hinata's opening speech in episode 1. A tall wall looms in front of you, and it's a view he couldn't normally see by himself, but now he can see the view from the top. This perfectly embodies what this first season's about. There can only be one loser and one winner. And if you win and you take it for granted, you will end up losing and you will regret it. If you lose, the ability to stand after that loss and to keep moving forward is strength. There are 6 players on the court. You are never alone. Whether you're on the winning or losing side, you have friends, family, mentors, or teammates to be there when you jump or when you fall. If you win or lose, it's what you do with it that determines how you grow as a player or a person. Everyone has the ability to see over a tall wall or obstacle that stands in their way. Over time, your defeats and victories will build who you are, but don't let them define who you are. Let them teach you who you can be. Those experiences will allow you to fly. They'll teach you that you can see from the top.
Karasuno! Fight!